Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nicole Hennessy, Vice President of the Music Business Association. Welcome to the Music Biz Passport. This virtual series allows music professionals to connect with international trendsetters, learn what does and does not work in their local music economies, and expose important cross-border collaborations that will make our worldwide industry even stronger. The Passport lineup is set for the rest of 2026. You can visit musicbiz.org and click on the Events tab to find a list of upcoming events that will include insights on Brazil and South Asia, as well as touch on topics of Arabic music, lyric subtitles in diverse languages, and scalable tools for music discovery, roster development, data insights, and direct-to-fan monetization in global markets. Music Biz also has this other slate of resources that are complementary to the industry at large. That includes our Common Ground webinar series, our Future of What podcast, as well as op-ed articles and Q&As prepared for our Keeping Tempo blog. Visit musicbiz.org to take advantage of all of those educational resources. I do want to take a minute to talk about our flagship annual event, that's Music Biz 2026, that will be held May 11th through the 14th in Atlanta. The event brings together over 2,000 professionals from more than 800 companies in 32 countries around the globe. Many call it the 4 most productive days on the music industry calendar. We will hold 3 of these passport events during the conference. Those titles, if you're looking at the conference agenda, those titles are From Backseat to Backstage, Driving Global Breakthroughs in Key Music Markets, The Global Rise and Influence of Latin Music in Emerging Genres, and The Diaspora Divide, Global Cultural Monetization. For more information on Music Biz 2026, check out musicbiz2026.com or musicbiz.org and back to that events tabs where you're going to find all the passport information. You'll also find more information on Music Biz 2026. For today's presentation, we have Music Cities, Creative Economies, and the Future of Monetization, presented by Downtown Music. This session looks at how music-focused cities can help grow global music revenue, tourism, jobs, and overall value of creative work. If you guys have questions during the presentation today, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you want to communicate with the panelists and ask them questions, put your questions in that Q&A box. There's also a chat box. Talk amongst yourselves, introduce yourselves, let us know where you're from. So talking amongst yourselves and with other attendees, that's in the chat box. Q&A box is for your panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to our panelists today. And again, thank Downtown for bringing this conversation to Music Biz Passport.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tando Makunga. I'm the Managing Director for Downtown Music Publishing Africa. I'm in Johannesburg, joined today by Filmona of Global Citizen, as well as Shane Shapiro from the Center for Music Ecosystems, as well as Sound Diplomacy. I'm really excited about this particular topic. It's something that we have been discussing over the past couple of weeks with the panelists, just trying to unpack the topic at hand, which is music cities, um, the economy, as well as how all of those relate to global transformation and economic transformation. And we often speak about music as a digital product. So whether that is streams, whether that is downloads, our obsession with the algorithm and how it impacts revenue, particularly in my world from a publishing perspective. But we also need to realize that music is born from physical places. It starts in someone's studio, it starts on a physical stage, it starts with real fans buying physical tickets at venues across the globe. And maybe just to zoom out before we get into the conversation, we know that the global music industry, and according to the IFPI, has reached $31.7 billion as of 2025, which is obviously very exciting to hear. But we also know that that growth and that revenue is not evenly distributed. Sub-Saharan Africa, as an example, represents just 0.4% of global music copyright value. And if you're familiar with Sub-Saharan Africa as a market and a territory, it's also a territory that also drives a lot of demographic growth, a youth demographic growth, which means that there's also a youth revenue and employment gap, which is something that I'm excited to chat about with Shane and Filmona. So how do we move music from culture to infrastructure, from passion to profession, and also from informal hustle to a formal, bankable economy? I'm going to start by introducing my very illustrious panel today, Shane Shapiro. He's a global thought leader on music and urban policy, founder of Sound Diplomacy and the Center for Music Ecosystems, and he's worked in over 130 cities. And my apologies, Shane. It's Dr. Shane Shapiro, PhD. Welcome, Shane.
Hey, Tando. Always a pleasure. And
And
it's great to see everyone as well. Sorry about my voice. I'm a bit allergies, so I'm a bit hoarse, but yeah.
all good, all good. Also joining us today, Filmona Haley Michael, Director of US Policy and Government Affairs at Global Citizen, leading advocacy at institutions like the IMF and the World Bank to position the creative economy as a driver of development. Welcome, Filmona.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you both. So to start off the conversation, Shane, you've worked through sound diplomacy and influenced over 130 cities globally. Just for our audience, let's set the scene. What in your mind are the core hallmarks of a music city? What does that look like?
It's all about how music is treated as a priority in a city. So a city to me is just a group of decisions and priorities that we're taking, as a community. What do we put investment into? What do we not put investment into? Where do we develop? Where do we not develop? All these kind of questions. And that's what a city is. It's just an ongoing conversation, essentially, about resource allocation and priorities. So I kind of find music to be one of those things that kind of, for pun intended, hums along on the periphery, where it happens everywhere. Where there's people, there's music. Um, but often, a lot of the decisions that are taken in cities impact music, yet music has no real relationship with the decision because it's a land use decision or a licensing decision or an economic decision or things like that. So I kind of find what we really try to do with cities is to get them to recognize that you need to make music a priority, right? Not any bigger than anything else, just a priority that you put direct and intentional thinking into. That means you need data to understand where it is and how it works and how it fits together. And you have to be able to make, as we say, evidence-based policy decisions rather than policy-based, evidence decisions. No, policy-based, you know what I mean? It's a long day here.
Policy
Yeah, we
decisions.
need evidence-based policies. And we find that a lot of cities tend to celebrate music, which is great. We want people doing that. But not recognizing that there's a whole bunch of things that they could be doing to safeguard, to develop, to support music making, music education, live music, and all of that. And we've tried really hard to explain how music works as an industry, which most people who enjoy music and love music and engage with music have no understanding of, which is not a value judgment. It's just the way it is. Why should they know if they don't work in it? But our mission is to say, by understanding how music works, you can understand how to invest in it. And by doing that in the context of how a city makes decisions, we hope that we can make cities, more amenable to supporting and engaging and investing in music in that way.
And maybe just to delve a little bit deeper in terms of formal policy, specific formal
Yeah.
policies, how effective do you think those are in addressing youth employment?
I think I think it's something that we need to spend much more time working on, right? I wonder how many people on this call listening to me's first job was in hospitality. Mine was. Right. I worked at a music venue and a bar. And I'm sure a lot of young people, that's their first job. And take it, we don't see that. We see that more as a stepping stone rather than as something that is integral, to the career development of a young person. So I think we need to do better at that. A lot of things right now are around how we tax land. And I apologize for getting a bit boring here, but in the US, how we choose to charge money for public services in cities, how we tax land, and how we tax businesses and how we tax property and how we license it. Often, a lot of the decisions were made a long time ago, and they're not supportive of music making. I actually saw today, for example, a city councilor in Cleveland, Ohio. If anyone is from Cleveland, there is a tax that has to be paid to the city um, to essentially put music on in small venues. It's, I believe, 4%. And a councilor instituted um, a bill, but instituted a vote in city council, I believe, to remove that for small venues, which would save venues, I read, between $2,000 and $6,000 or so in their tax bill. That is money that can then be invested into young people and employing more young people. So we need to think more about that. But you wanted to get into the weeds. A lot of the stuff that we do is that it's really into the weeds of how a city operates, how a city makes essentially taxes and spends. And a lot of let's say, the history of how cities do that is antithetical to how music is supported in communities and in cities. We don't kind of put together how we invest in people and place and how we invest in music, and we need to bring them together more. And we haven't done a very good job of that. But things, I think, are getting a little better.
Thanks so much, Shane. Over to you, Fomona. I know you mentioned that you're going to be leaving us a little bit early today. You're in spring meetings this week. Could you share a little bit about what you've seen, how music traditionally is viewed as soft culture or entertainment? And from your lens, a global citizen, why is music now being presented to institutions like the World Bank and the IMF as a hard economic engine for emerging generations?
Oh, thank you. So I think, for folks who don't know, the World Bank president, Ajay Banga, launched a jobs agenda last year. And it's because of the growing jobs crisis in developing countries, especially those across the continent, where we're seeing a huge gap in jobs. So it's predicted in the next 10 to 15 years, there'll be 1.2 billion people who will reach working age in developing countries. But only about 400 million jobs will be generated. So that's a huge deficit of 800 million. This is across countries. And so this is why the World Bank came up with this jobs agenda to really help focus economies on how are we going to prepare and make sure there's economic opportunities for all of these young people who will be needing them in the next decade or so. So as part of that, the bank has already identified several sectors. So there's agriculture, healthcare, and a couple others where they feel like there is the need and the ability to really grow jobs at scale. And so this is where Global Citizen comes in, where we have been speaking with the bank because we want them to, encouraging them to think of the creative economies as one of those key sectors that they should be pushing and really incorporating into that campaign. The idea then is that by the bank focusing on this, of course, all their member countries will then pay attention and recognize creative economies if it were to be included. And this would help to establish kind of best policies, programs, experts, and real structure and intentionality, if that's a word, to make sure that there is real investment in this sector, since we see it as one of the fastest growing and really capable of having growing scale jobs at scale. So, and to be fair, the World Bank Group is already engaged in the creative economies work. We know that IFC, which is one of the parts of the group, has already deployed over $800 million in the creative sector. And this is across markets and across sectors. And so our thinking is, by having a dedicated pillar, it would really kind of pull together all of those strands and make sure that it is seen as a priority. And there's that institutional weight and visibility, frankly, on that sector, which would really help it. So that's kind of why we're aiming and hoping that the bank will consider it as one of their core pillars.
Yeah.
Shane, you
I
wanted to add
think
something?
I think these are kinds of things that a lot of people don't recognize or see that really matter. Like one of the issues and one of the great things that Global Citizen does and that Filmona does is if something is, if something is not a priority in policy, then it's not a priority, right? So if
Yep.
it's not a stated thing that matters, then people don't think about it. And if we're talking about how to create jobs in music, how to get cities to care, how to get countries to care, if the creative economy is not a recognized thing that we all agree that we care about, then it's really, really hard to get people to care about it. And I'm just saying, for the last 13 years that I've been doing sound diplomacy, because I'm old, so much of our work has just been getting people to agree that music and the creative economy is an economic good in and of itself, is just something to put effort into caring about. Then how we care about it, that's almost easier than getting people to care about it. And I think that we're making headway in the creative economy, but we're nowhere near there yet.
Yeah. I want to maybe back to you, Shane, just unpack the MEDI project, the Music Economic Development Initiative under the Center for Music Ecosystems. And maybe just for those people that are not familiar with the project, just unpack what that project is. One of the things that I love that is probably like always repeated when speaking about the MEDI project is that we need tracks before we can run trains. Could you just explain exactly what that means as it relates to that project?
I'm going to try my best. This is a good test. Everyone on the chat can say, did Shane, did I do a good job? No, the Music Economy Development Initiative is a project that the nonprofit that I run, the Center for Music Ecosystems and Global Citizen run together. And really our mission is to ensure that music can be an economy in every country in the world, starting in Africa. So I see that by the chat, there's people from all over the world. There are a lot of countries where music copyright, for example, either does not exist or may not be as optimized as it is in other countries. And if we don't have the basic foundations in place, which is regulation, infrastructure, and education, for music to be recognized as an economic good, i.e., it can be invested in, we can create jobs and so on, then it won't happen. So what we're trying to do is create a data set to ensure that music is recognized as an economic good in every country by essentially calculating the amount of economic value, the amount of money that music should be worth if it was taken seriously in the countries in which it's not taken seriously. And in terms of doing that, try to find new investors like the World Bank and other global banks to invest in music as development, like investing in anything else, like investing in schools and roads and hospitals and anything else, because we believe that music can create jobs at a faster or at an equally faster rate as anything else. But we need data, we need arguments. So the Music Economy Development Initiative is trying to help create, as we say, the tracks, the regulations, the arguments, the economic data, starting in Africa across the continent. So that the amazing trains, which are all these amazing companies and artists and talent across Africa, and any other country, have the same opportunities as any other artist would have in any other country that may have, more copyright protections and infrastructure.
And are you able to share just any of the research or results collated thus
Yeah.
far?
So if the website is musiceconomy.org, I'll put it in the chat so you can have a look. We have built a data portal and we've created a data set for every country in Africa. I think we are the first data set to have data on every single country in Africa, plus 10 more. And we have calculated that the economic opportunity for recorded music in Nigeria and Kenya, which is about $286 million. So it's about 230 in Nigeria, about 50 in Kenya. That should be in the pockets of artists and rights holders right now, but aren't because of infrastructure challenges. So we believe there's a significant opportunity. So that's, $250 million in 2 countries. And we think that if we add up, it could be much, much more.
And one of the highlights from that research is around the local revenue capture crisis, where we see that a lot of African music is exported globally and captured internationally and not in the countries and cities, I guess, where originates from. Could you just unpack a little bit more about the impact of that gap?
Yeah, and I saw the message from Chrissy. We're working on it. The economic data, we have 2 more countries that we're working on right now, and we're working on the basic data sets for Latin America and the Caribbean as well. Obviously, there's incredible talent across Africa and every country in Africa. And the problem is most of it leaves immediately because of, as you said, it's a non-domicile content, right? You essentially have to non-domicile and then remit your income back. In order for music to be domiciled in a country, it needs to be taxed in that country, and you need to capture it through whether it be direct licensing or collective management. So the economic forecast that we have calculated includes the amount of money that essentially should stay in the country that isn't, because of the fact that the infrastructure is not there. And it is an issue. Well, you face it every day, Tando. I'd say that, the most incredible African talent has to register with PRS or SACEM or ASCAP or BMI. Or sometimes, not all of them. I know there are other options and some great options as well, but many of them do because they don't have the options. And this is a challenge because then the money immediately leaves and then comes back, right? So what we're saying is we need to create a mechanism to keep it in the place, and then and obviously then the business of that artist will work in whatever way internationally.
Correct. I saw
Yes.
someone mentioned on the chat.
Of course, Capasso.
Which is, one of those collective management organizations, which really also needs to be, I guess, part of these types of conversations. How do we start to capture that revenue efficiently, also for creators?
But and I'll shut up after that. It's, as you know, and as Robert knows, it's extremely complicated. As we know, different rights, different agreements, tariffs, all this kind of stuff. The mission of MEDI is really to offer a very simple argument. We believe that music should be a job everywhere, full stop, and the only barrier of entry is if you suck. That's my belief, is if you're not good enough, so be it. But everyone should have the same opportunity, the same access to infrastructure, education, and regulation, and to be protected if they wish. And we need government to understand that, yes, music is complicated behind the scenes, but the simple, the simple nature of human intellect and human intellectual property should be protected at the source. And we should be able to generate jobs in every community in the world through music. We shouldn't have to have people essentially leave their home, theoretically, just to be able to pursue music as a career.
Correct. I know last year, Filmona, Global Citizen, in partnership with the MEDI Project, launched Move Africa. I think it was Ghana and Lagos. There were also some events this year in Rwanda as well as South Africa. Could you just unpack how Global Citizens and the actions, as you phrased, as they're termed, from fans translate into actual systemic power? So all of the fan activity, everyone gets excited about John Legend or Doja Cat touring in a particular city, but how does that translate into actual systemic power?
Sure. So I guess, overall, Global Citizen is an advocacy organization. We have hundreds of thousands of what we call our global citizens, our advocates around the world. And these are people who are just passionate about ending extreme poverty. So we work across issues, whether it's, funding for food security, global education, sexual reproductive rights, across all issues. And so when people come to us, it is because they have this passion for these various issues and they want to know what is it that I can do to take action and really help, cause some kind of a change, positive movement. So folks start by going to our website or on our app and really learning about the issues. That is step one. So we have various quizzes, profiles of advocates of various, local organizations. So they start by learning. We also do an Advocacy 101 kind of educational series where we are helping people to understand how to effectively communicate and influence their elected officials. So from there, they then start taking action. So they decide, what is the issue that they're most interested in. And then we'll, through our app, be able to contact, either send an email, tweet at, or make a phone call to their, in the US, it's a congressional office, and otherwise to elected officials. So that's how global citizens who are passionate about these issues will engage with us. When it comes specifically to Move Africa, each area, each concert essentially has a different purpose or social good aspect to it. I think we launched Move Africa about 3 years ago at this point. So it is essentially a touring circuit across the continent where we're bringing world-class artists, a few of whom hadn't been to the continent or performed there before, and come to do major shows. So and then the aspect that we're working on varies. In Ghana, there was an opportunity for folks to do a beach cleanup and really focused on kind of environmental issues. In Rwanda, our recent one, it was focused more on global health issues and healthcare related. So it varies. And then the jobs aspect of it, though, the creative jobs really is more about the actual positions and the opportunities to help support these concerts there, and providing that economic opportunity and skills.
And maybe just to hone in on the most recent Rwanda event, it employed over 1,000 Rwandans, used 75% local crew. Can you just chat a little bit about the skills transfer, training and development as it relates to touring specifically, and maybe Rwanda as an example?
Yeah. So the de-risking really comes in terms of making it viable. Our goal with these series is really to prove that there is kind of ready and willing and trained workforce that is capable of supporting world-class concerts. So rather than having to fly in staff to do everything, the idea is to identify, train, and support and really build up folks locally. So with the Rwanda example, I think it was over 1,000 this time around. And again, some of these folks are people who had worked with us, I think, the last 1 or 2 shows as well. So again, getting more of that training. And I think I may have mentioned that we did this survey of our African global citizens. So all of our advocates, we got over almost 1,000 responses. And it was really focused on kind of that jobs crisis that I mentioned at the outset, where we feel like the creative economies could really help fill in. But looking at that jobs crisis, what are some of those key barriers to securing work? And one thing that came across from our advocates across the continent was a lack of practical experience and kind of that on-the-job training. They felt like, okay, even though I have a university degree, when it comes time to get a job, I'm always asked for experience. But how can I get experience if I don't have experience, right? So we see that, of course, it's specifically in the creative economies. And so that is one of the ideas with our Move Africa series, that we're helping folks to actually get that on the job training and experience. And, so I think this year's impact was really, there was a focus on the Harambe Youth Employment Accelerator Partnership. So over 3 years now, it's 120 Rwandans, people between 18 to 25 years old, who participated in this program. And the exposure and experience they're getting is across production, hospitality, logistics, ticketing, marketing, and the event coordination. So this is something that we have worked on again for the last few years there, and hoping to continue to build on that for our years to come in Rwanda.
Amazing. And obviously, when you do these post-event surveys and feedback, it is also shared with the various cities and the various policymakers. What kind of feedback are you getting from your city partners or your country partners?
Yeah. I think the main thing that we heard from this survey, a lot of learnings, but definitely just the huge gap that I started to mention, that it's, there are plenty of people who are already educated, already have the degrees that they thought that they needed, but still cannot be employed. And so one of the things that we heard is that in several of these countries, the crisis is too big for government to be able to do it alone. Even if they wanted to, they're not going to be able to create the jobs at scale. And sometimes even the private sector maybe is not willing or able to. And so one thing folks talked about really is entrepreneurship and the need to support entrepreneurs, and doing that by getting rid of red tape, cutting down the bureaucracy, providing even seed funding for entrepreneurs and those who are really trying to start up their businesses. And we can see that here as well. Another thing is really looking at how do we formalize the informal economy. So again, trying to capture the value, because Shane mentioned earlier how much of the value of African music ends up being exported. So how do you formalize these sectors, make sure they have the legal protections, the security that they need, so that way that value is captured and kept on the continent. So I think those are some of the learnings that we have learned, that we've been sharing with decision makers thus far.
Thanks. And maybe to pivot back to you, Shane, just on your engagements and feedback that you have with institutions, banking institutions, the finance sector, and also policymakers. What are the general misunderstandings or learnings that you're picking up in terms of the knowledge gap or value gap, I'll call it that, for the finance sector?
Yeah, I think as Philmona says, there's been a concerted effort to invest in the creative economy. There's been a lot of money, or at least big press releases, issued about a lot of money that is going to be invested in Africa and other areas around the creative economy. But most of it ends up in real estate or in film because they're easier to invest in. So one of the challenges that we do face all the time, very often, I faced it today, was that music is seen as too complex to invest in as an asset. I don't like using that word. I don't mean it in the same way as others do. But it is interesting that we have this kind of odd dichotomy where obviously there's significant investments in the past in heritage assets, but we're not recognizing the economy and how to invest in, I'm calling it kind of living heritage or future heritage. So we do have a challenge that we're trying to overcome of simply explaining how music makes money. Basic, literally how music makes money, and how it can make money over a long period of time, without a huge amount of money being vested into it, in a way that it's transparent and tracked and so on and so forth. So obviously, I'm sure everyone on this call knows that, we don't need any more technology to solve this problem. We have that, but we do have a mindset issue of a lot of investment professionals, bankers, and many people who work in government see music as something that is too complex to care about, because the cost benefit to them is not high enough to get involved, because they think it's too much effort. I'm not going to get as much benefit. Building a film studio is actually quite a bit easier. And in some, they're not wrong. So we have a lot of work to do, and we are doing it. But let's say the differences of opinion in our industry that sometimes find their way into the mainstream do not make it easy to explain that music actually is, a fairly straightforward business to invest in. Sometimes we air our dirty laundry a bit too much, which makes it harder for us collectively to articulate for our collective value. And then we have to go back and backtrack. No, it's actually easier than you think. And that's a significant challenge that we face all the time, is in music, that we have to address.
So you've mentioned there's an appetite, for example, to invest in a physical space such as a film studio. What is the challenge as relates to data that would say you're investing in a theater space where there can be rehearsals, or a live, music venue, outdoor live music venue? What kind of data are we missing to make
I
that
think,
decision a little bit easier?
yeah, I'm just looking at some of the jobs of the people who've kind of written about themselves. I see like management and sync and so on. All of these things are incredibly important, but to the people that we're trying to aggregate for, they're not jobs, right? And the reason is, I'm not sure how many people tried to go to the bank and get a loan to start a business in music, right? I certainly didn't, because I knew what would happen. And I think what we have two or three distinct challenges. One is that most development in this space is based on tangible assets, so physical infrastructure, things that we can see and touch. And music trades mainly in intangible assets, things that we can't see, the copyright and so on. That's one. Two is the borderless nature of our business. So how do you tax it, and how do you track it? Because you can't invest in it as a development perspective if you can't track how it's taxed and how those taxes then are invested into public services. And then three, it's the complexity, and I write a lot about this, of everyone sees music differently, right? Because we all see music from our own personal love of music, from our version of music. So we make decisions often based on emotion and based on feeling, rather than based on, fact and data. And so when you're talking to a policymaker or an investor about music, they're probably thinking about the last gig that they went to, or the record that they love, or often the fact that their child wants to work in the industry or something. And not thinking objectively, as they would probably be thinking about agriculture or tech or healthcare or these other sectors that Global Citizen brilliantly advocates for. So kind of de-emotionalizing music, but still not taking away the emotional value of it, is really hard. And it's something that I work on every day, to try to explain the seriousness of it, but while still obviously maintaining the fact that this is, I believe that music is a superpower. I believe that music is, the closest thing to magic that we're ever going to come across. But you can't really invest in magic. So you have to
What is the
have
ROI
this.
on magic? Yeah.
Exactly.
One of the bold solutions, I'll call it that you've advocated for, is a music finance facility. And I think the number that you had was 300 to 500 million dollars. Could you just explain what that solution could look like? I mean, we're thinking big plays, scale, something that could have a direct impact on solving some of these issues.
Yeah, and obviously, Flamona being at the World Bank spring meetings, there are people that could make this happen there. And that is why Global Citizen is there, and there are other people as well. Well, the idea really, again, is so if people go on the MEDI website, there's a report that I wrote with the Economist Will page. I'm sure some people have heard of here. It's called "We Need Tracks Before We Have Trains." The idea of a music development fund or a music finance facility is based on existing funds that exist in sports. So there are funds to build football pitches and basketball courts all over Africa and other places, thinking that you build a football pitch, that's a community amenity, i.e., 99.9% of the people who use it are never going to become professional, but that one person, right, could become Neymar or whatever. Or I'm not that good at this on the football side. So what we need in music is we don't need development banks to be investing in talent. Okay, we have We have labels, we have management companies, we have festivals, we have others. We have Move Africa, what Global Citizen does. We need development banks to be investing in infrastructure, and literally the copyright infrastructure, investing in training and in systems and in licensing and in policy and so on. And we're trying to build an economic model to demonstrate that to a government or to a bank, that if you invest in that, if you put $1 into that, then in 10 to 12 years, you're going to get $1.04 back every year, which is about what you need to do for development investment. So that's the idea, is that we think that we could, if we spent enough money in enough places and had a 10 to 15-year window, similar to how development money is spent, not similar to how kind of music industry investments are, then we can demonstrate that music is a significant long-term investment, which I think is true anyways, because why would pension funds be investing in music catalogs if they didn't expect a long-term patient revenue from them?
Low risk investment.
It's low risk. And I believe that music, if you do it in the right way, at a big enough scale in this context, it actually, and you do it properly and transparently and effectively, it is low risk. And that's what we're working on, and we're hoping together, working with you as well. Chando is my board chair, so my boss, everyone knows, in the sense that the Center for Music Ecosystems. We believe that we can make this happen, and we believe that we can demonstrate that that music can be a true driver for development around the world. We just need to think about it differently.
Thanks, Shane. I want to pivot back maybe to just what you spoke about in terms of the long term and outcomes. And obviously, we're very much at a foundational stage in terms of these types of conversations. Philmona, in terms of the investment that Global Citizen has made into the Move Africa model, do you expect, let's say in year 2030, what kind of impact would Move Africa had on an example, the touring circuit on the continent? What kind of long-term impact do you think these initiatives are going to have?
Sure. I mean, our goal and what we're, continuing to work towards is just to ensure that there is, like you said, self-sustaining circuit. We want to be able to prove that this is viable, that there are plenty of, willing and able and trained staff who could help put on these world-class events. Want to prove that there are plenty of demand, so people who are willing to fill up stadiums, pay for tickets, and welcome these artists to their cities, to their countries. And really, I think it is almost like, just having a living proof example, really, that this is possible. So that is our goal. That's what we've been working towards. And every year, we see more and more, other folks. Even one of our artists we've worked with in the past, Tim's, we saw recently launched our own Leading Vibe initiative in South Africa, also focused on training and supporting, focused on female creatives. So I think there's, there's a lot of interest and demand, and it's really just proving that this is viable. So that's our goal.
Similar question to you, Shane. It's 2030. Where do you think the MEDI project, the initiatives and partnerships and research that you've undertaken, what results do you expect to have by that time frame?
I'm hoping that there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are staying in Africa rather than leaving. That is my goal, is that there are more people across the continent making money, doing what they're doing now. They don't have to do any more. They're just making the money that is owed to them. And that that MEDI is a catalyst. Obviously, we're a research project. We're just trying to demonstrate the opportunity, and we're nudging and we're pushing, and but we're not investors ourselves, but we do believe that we can hopefully unlock tens of millions of dollars in investment into the systems, into the tracks, which hopefully will then over time release, hundreds of millions in running of the trains. So, but my goal, I want 2030 to come around, and you know, and that $230 million that should stay in Nigeria stays in Nigeria, and that 50 million that or whatever in Kenya stays there. And we're going to be doing other, as you know, forecasts for each country, and that every government recognizes how important this is. Some are, by the way. I think one thing I just want to add before we close is this is a really positive conversation. Um, Music is a pretty cost-effective investment. It's not that political. It's not tariffed. It's something that a lot of governments are beginning to take seriously, right? The tide is on our side here. We just have to push the boulder up the hill a little bit more, and I'm hoping by 2030 we'll have pushed it over the hill so it starts rolling down.
And while we're just talking about the impact on perceptual change at a city level, do you think there's also in other sectors, related sectors such as film, TV, tourism sector, conversations to be had around the importance of maybe framing it as a music city in order to impact other sectors as well from a jobs opportunity, from a jobs perspective, I mean?
I th- yeah, I think so. I think we need to do better so a lot of places are already kind of doing it, but they don't realize they're doing it, like mainly by the development of stadiums and large infrastructure projects that are tied to music. I'm not sure. Yesterday there was an announcement, or 2 days ago, of a new arena that's going to be built in Nairobi. I've been working on it, so it's very exciting. I know there's arenas in South Africa and in Lagos and other places. I think that they're kind of seen as standalone rather than seen as catalysts for ecosystem development. And I think there's what we have to work harder on across the continent and in other places as well. There's 46 countries in the world, just that do not have a CMO of their own. 46, right? So, I think that by demonstrating the economic potential of music across cities, it then again forces everyone's hand to improve more and more. So.
Thanks, Shane. I'm going to just go into some of the questions. I know you have been engaging with the Q&A element. If anyone has a question, no worries. But I just want to highlight a few that maybe both of you can speak to. There's a question from Tabisi Ndlovu. I think he said he's in Kenya. What are the benefits of being considered a music city? And I'm not sure if Filmona, you want to start, and then Shane can also add his perspective.
I think that's a good one for Shane, so I'll let him take that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The benefits, well, I truly think that it's not just about being a music city doesn't mean anything. So first off, let's change the language, right? Every city is a music city because you have people in it making music, I believe. It's about a city taking music seriously as a policy vehicle, right? Like it's the same thing as a city providing clean water seriously, or providing, better public transit, right? A city that takes music seriously is a more livable city. That means more investments in music. That will probably be more live music because there will be a better regulatory environment to support those venues. There'll be more music education opportunities, more schools and vocational technical education, so on. Their music will be more integrated into healthcare, mental health, dementia, and other issues. Like it, some of it I can't prove. Well, I can because we have tons of examples, but I can't prove to you en masse. But I always think that when people care more about what's in our hearts, we make better decisions about using our minds. And when we engage with music, it forces us to open our minds because it compels us to open our hearts. And I feel like in the decisions that we take in cities, we need to think more about, the broader community across diversity and other things. And I think the more we think about music and take it seriously, it kind of forces us to be open-minded about other things.
Agreed. There is another question, and maybe Filmona, if you could also try and add your lens on this. It's from Maria Lozana. There's a huge step in establishing university programs in the music industry because young people will see it as a career path. And I know you spoke a little bit about the struggle around study, education, and then not having actual jobs. Could you just add a little bit of perspective on formal education for the music industry, and is it a real and tangible way to secure employment currently, I
I
guess?
mean, yes. So based on, the survey that we just did recently last month, there was no shortage of formal education and young people with college degrees. And this was again across the board. It wasn't specific to creative economies. So it wasn't a lack of education that was preventing the jobs. It was a fact that the jobs simply weren't there. Everyone can decide for themselves based on their own country and context whether or not it makes sense. But the impression that we were left with from this survey is really that, this is why folks said that entrepreneurship seemed to be the real answer. Like, if the economies we have, our governments, private sector are not capable of creating the space for the jobs, then how can we create the jobs ourselves? So how do we formalize either the informal work that we're doing, or how can we create new institutions, new entities, whatever, and get that value created and kept on the continent? So, I think, everyone would have to decide for themselves whether or not, and even in the United States, people are having to question whether or not it's worth the cost of the degrees for many jobs across the board here. Like, does that add up? Or is it better to kind of go on in and see how you can create something and have a conducive environment where you are able to create those kinds of opportunities? And I will just say, I know you all are staying a few minutes longer. I am going to have to jet out. But thank you so much for having me here today. Shane is
so much,
definitely
Filmona.
our in-house
Yeah,
expert. So we
yeah.
can
Thanks,
to answer
Filmona.
the remaining questions.
I can
Thank you all for your time
I can
today.
try to answer the remaining. Have fun,
Thanks,
Filmona, at
thanks,
the
Filmona. Good
meetings.
luck.
Thank you. Bye.
One couple more questions. We
Yeah,
do
these are
have a
good.
couple more questions.
These are
Yeah.
good questions, Sando. They're making me
I just
work.
want to I just want to
Jeez.
read Sekarara Kra, apologies for my pronunciation. I'm actively involved in the creative industry in Rwanda, primarily focusing on music business artist management. Rwanda has made strong investments in infrastructure and positioning itself as regional hub, yet many creatives still struggle to monetize their work sustainably, which I think has been, the ongoing story of the day in terms of the discussion today. So based on global examples, what specific policy or ecosystem changes are most effective in translating infrastructure?
For Rwanda,
Well, just globally, but based on global experience, what specific policy or ecosystem changes are most effective in translating infrastructure?
usually the most important thing, the step one is every country, every city has an economic development board. I actually know the Rwandan one pretty well. I've worked with them. And there are people who are hired whose job it is to create jobs in places and attract investment, right? There are chambers of commerce, economic development boards, whatever. They change their names. The most important thing to start is to have the creative economy or music, usually the creative economy, as one of their priority sectors. So all of these places will set their priorities and targets. Usually it's, advanced manufacturing, defense, agriculture, whatever, right? Tourism. Very rarely the creative economy is a part of it. Step one, and a hugely important policy win, is to get that because it forces people to act. Then you have to create the, then you have to create the argument to attract business or to create business, right? Because then you're set with goals. Rwanda has done some of this, not all, but some of this, and that is universal everywhere. Every single place has one of these kind of organizations, and every single one of them has a strategy that often ignores the creative economy, not all of them. I think that's one. And And then, in terms of the regulation around live music and licensing, that differs in every place. Most places regulate live music in the same framework as they regulate alcohol. Some places are more liberal, some places are less liberal. But having a licensing framework, i.e., rules to say what you can and can't do in a place that is specific to the music and not focused on the booze or other issues, is also something that is hugely important everywhere. And it manifests itself differently in every country, obviously. Some countries are more formal, some more informal, but that's something that by enabling business to just do the more that you can, the more time that people have to do the job they actually want to do rather than paperwork, usually the more jobs they can create.
And I also want to add just to that, just in terms of
Ugh.
what specific ecosystem changes are important for a successful music economy, let's call it that. I would also say
Mhm,
just a healthy, organized creator sector. So whether that
mhm,
is organizing yourselves as a collective management organization, whether that is compliance from music users, radio, TV, live music venues, all of those elements play a huge factor to answer your question around at what point do creatives and artists then start to be able to actually monetize the work that they're making? So music users
yeah.
are engaging with all of these things, but we as a sector, and maybe we didn't speak about Rwanda specifically, but as a sector, what is the collective management organization? Is there compliance in terms of licensing and reporting and usage and all of these elements? So I do also always say it starts with the creative sector in themselves, organizing themselves, and then directing
Mhm.
policymakers and government and the commercial side of our world on how to engage with our sector. So that would probably be my next answer.
Yeah.
We are running out of time, and I just want to add one last question. Andile Magwaza has asked, does the idea around a music city also touch on engaging with city officials and business people to recognize their contribution to music monetization? In South Africa, CMOs still fight with businesses and venues to pay music performance
Mhm.
licenses, which is around compliance. Perhaps if the city bylaws specifically, are positioned to address this, it could also help. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there was a question about AI too. That I feel is another webinar.
Yes,
Um,
that's why I didn't
often,
even want
yeah,
to.
often in a country that has no copyright, AI to some extent is just another rung on a bell. But yeah, I think the challenge is based, yeah, you sometimes you have to force people to do things, right? We don't realize in society all the things that we all agree on and do all the time, right? We walk on a sidewalk, we don't walk on the road. We stand on the right and we walk on the left in some places, like all that kind of stuff. And music is often seen as a cost and not a benefit because that is how it's ingrained in our head,
Mm,
right? It's optional. And then
mm,
obviously we have a history of it being free and accessible and so on and so forth. So unless there's a concerted effort to demonstrate the benefit,
yeah.
then people will always argue about the cost. But that comes with, this is the whole concept of the music policy stuff, is there's no end game here. I wish there was. There isn't. The minute that you start advocating for music in this way is you're advocating for music. And and every day you're constantly fighting for this. So, but
Correct.
you know,
I'm just going to note Robert Singerman's notes in the chat: enforcement of regulations for aspects like copyright infringement beyond the Copyright Administration, which
yeah,
I think answers your question a little bit, Andile. It starts with the enforcement of the regulations. A lot of countries have some fantastic, copyright laws, but the enforcement is
yeah.
lacking. Yeah. So,
And the
yeah.
other question around Move Africa, again, that's another, I'd be happy to do another one around music and social change. Um, I guess maybe I could use that as a tool just to do a little bit of, I'm supposed to do this, Tando, but if anyone knows, for those who are interested more, by the way, I wrote a book about music and city policy. I'd put a link in so you can check it out. Another book, I have a new book coming out in February that tackles music and social change, which will be announced in June. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, please just, stay in touch.
We have run out of time. I want to thank you so much, Shane, for your time. Thank you, Music Biz. Thank you, Downtown, as well, for presenting this webinar. And thank you, everyone that joined. Some fantastic engagement on the chat. I wish we had more time, but thank you. Thank you so much. I guess we will share the resources on the chat if everyone is looking for more information. It is Center for Music Ecosystems, and all of the various projects are there. And obviously, Move Africa, Global Citizen, you'll find online as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tando. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you both. And I just want to, reiterate what Tando said. There was great conversation in the chats, great questions today. So definitely, I think there are some touch points that we could have a separate webinar on, so we can talk in the back end about those kind of things.
Perfect.
So,
Thanks
thank
so
you
much.
both.
Have a lovely day, everyone.
You the
Bye.
same.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.